All right, so this is another look at the intricacies of the theology of Henry Cloud and John Townsend. They say that the Bible is a myth, and that they have a spin on the Bible, which is this myth, and it's very very intricate, but it's also very very simple. It just involves the concept of boundaries, which is their first book, and everything flows into that ideology. So these two things are going to be very, very much connected. They're all connected, but the idea of your boundaries with God, that is in chapter 13 of How People Grow by Cloud and Townsend, and this ideal of subduing the earth. They're a very, very the connection here is very tight. So, but this is all connected with the boundaries ideal. So, chapter 13 talks about you're having your boundaries with God. God's created His boundaries, and you don't need to try to impose on God and tell Him to go outside of His boundaries. Respect God's boundaries. He respects your boundaries. You need to respect His boundaries. So what is His boundaries? His boundaries is He made everything, and then He took a powder. That is, He does not intercede in the affairs of men. So all through their books, and especially in chapter 13, it talks about it. They'll say sporadically through all of the writings, don't pray to God. Don't pray to God about this. Don't ask God to change you. Don't ask God to change your mate. Don't ask God to, if you're in a bad situation, don't ask God to intercede and do something miraculous, or as Townsend was saying in one of his books, don't ask for magic. Don't ask for magic from God. You need to work out your own salvation. This is why they always get these verses and really work them over to fit into their ideal of myth. You need to figure this out. God has given you a job. He had a job, and now he's set those boundaries. He's given you a job and expects you to work within these boundaries. This is your job. Now they will say everything that's happens is 100% God and 100% man. That's 200%? But what that really means is He's doing His job 100%. You need to do your job 100%. This is His job. He created everything. He created everything that's knowable. He created a universe that can be understood. And once we understand that, then we're good to go. This gives us all of the resources we need. If you're familiar with their work, God's resources, God's resources, God's resources, right? The natural earth are His resources. The resources for the emotions, and this is all experts. The experts in, the leaps and bounds that's been made in science over the last 200 years, these are now God's resources. They're resources because God made them. And our job is to subdue the earth. That is, figure out the earth. And once we figured it out, once we know what all our resources is, all we have to go to do is follow our resources. This is our task. This is our 100% to do. God's done His 100% and made everything where it can be understood. Of course, this is part of a myth. I don't even know if they believe that God created anything, but this is how they're interpreting the Bible as a myth. Now, this is an old ideal, and it was most popular during the time of the Enlightenment, where science rose in prominence among the intellectuals of the world, they stopped studying theology. Uh, the great minds of the back before that, Luther, Saint Augustine. Now you can go through all of them, and this is the great men's what they were studying God. And there was a transition during this period where people started to studying the sciences, trying to figure out how things worked. And they did a terrific job of it. The scientific method was discovered, and people started using that. And then they started building their knowledge. So these people were called deists. So what they believed was God made everything, and they always used it and symbolized as when they talked about it. Well, God made a big clock. This world is like a big clock. And once you figure out the clock, you can just go, well, yeah, the clock works like this. You want some knowledge of the world? You want to figure things out? Figure out the clock. Figure out the mechanism. How does physics work? How does the body works? How does the stars and the changing of the astronomical things? Quit looking at that myth as something that's God made to do whatever He had in mind to do, but look at that as scientifically. Quit looking at it as something that's not really real. That understanding, but this is the reality of it. Follow the reality of it. All right. So once you figure that out, in this terminology of Cloud and Townsend, you have subdued the earth. You have done what God has required of Adam and Eve in the garden. Although it's just a myth, they don't believe in Adam and Eve. It's a myth. Once humanity has subdued the earth, which it has done, then all you got to do is use these resources. You can figure out anything. So God has done His job. Now you've done your job. You don't need to pray to God because you just use God's resources. If you're familiar with any of their books, there you go. What's their website called? Cloud and Townsend Recourses. So, and that's what they're talking about right here, subduing the earth. So if you have this ideal down, so what experts do people need now? If you have problems with your car, you go to an expert. If you have problems with your building, you go to an expert. There's experts for everything, and everything's been pretty much figured out. A lot of things haven't, but you know that as far as living your life today, it's done. Except for what? Well, not even except for what else? The last thing that got figured out was human beings, their needs. What are people needs? People are isolated. People are out of relationships. People are angry with each other. People kill other people. They hate other people. There's all these conflicts. The human condition. Now, the human condition can be subdued. It can be subdued with the resources that God has already provided. So you need an expert in what? Now they will say, because they relate everything to God and they use God in Christian terminology to bring in unwitting and unknowing and people who really understand the Bible or understand these concepts of the Bible. They use these Bible words and they go, oh, that's Christian redemption. The body of Christ, Jesus Christ, grace. All of these things, these words are changed. They have their own spin on them, as they say in their book, As People Grow. Chapter 1, verse 30, not verse, it should be verse. This is scripture according to them. page 23, chapter 1, it says they put a spin. It says, they said, we put a spin on all of these concepts. And this is the spin, that it's a myth, that it's like a fairy tale. And so that's the depth of it, the real depth of it. The stories in the Bible really didn't happen. They're a myth to teach us how to be restored back to our who we're supposed to be, our true nature. But anyway, so they said, well, if you want to know what to do with your life, you need to go to an expert in the will of God. And that expert in the will of God is the psychologist. So that's who they are, because they have tackled this just like someone has subdued the ideal of physics. So now we can fly airplanes, go to space, make chemicals that are, you take them in your body and it cures your body or heals your body or gets rid of your symptoms or makes your life more better, much better. So all of these physical things are you have resources to this, but if you want to know how to be at peace with yourself and your neighbors and have a society that works, you need to have an expert in God. And God's will is that that's what it is. Go to your expert. This is the expert in humanity. And of course, there are over 200. This isn't a science. It's called a soft science by scientists. Psychology is because there's over 200 different ways of looking at or teaching or an understanding of psychology and how people work. And of course, this is really limited to Western society because other societies, they don't think the way we do, and it doesn't make any sense to them. So they'd have to create another hundreds for like the Chinese or whatever. It's just the way. This is the way of because there's so many variations. How can this be truth? How can this be correct? And of course, of these 2,000, there's thousands of ways to, you pick I took a class in psychology when I was in college many moons ago, and this lady gave us about 6 different, professor, about 6 different ways of these. She gave us maybe the 6 most popular. So I asked her, well, which one's true? Which one do you believe? She goes, oh, well, I take part of this one, and I like part of this one, part of this one, and I just put them together, and I make my own up because that's the way I see it. Well, that's not science, okay? It's nothing close to science. So they have their own particular spin, and theirs is this ideal of everything is about relationships, and if you want to get healed, you need to be in the right relationship, which we have dealt with in another video, the ideal of relationships. So, but this one is just concerned with the boundaries with God. God is the creator. The boundaries of man. His job is to subdue the earth. He has done that. God is no longer necessary. All right. Thank you.